What are the consequences of offending a Mexican drug lord? Although Mike was beaten to a pulp, he successfully sent Tuku to prison, and he received a large reward for it. At the same time, his daughter-in-law got her wish and moved to a more upscale community. However, what Mike never expected was that he still attracted Uncle Ding Ding from the Salamanca family, who was also Tuku's uncle. He found Mike, who was eating in the restaurant, and communicated with him in a very polite tone. He scolded his nephew Tuku for being ignorant and not knowing how to respect the elderly and love the young. At the same time, he also admitted that the hot-tempered Tuku should go to jail to learn a lesson, but 8 years in prison was unnecessary. He asked Mike to ask the police to modify his testimony to admit that the gun was brought by Mike, and Tuku only snatched it from his pocket and then had fingerprints on it. Mike said, "Wouldn't I be charged with illegal possession of a gun?" However, Uncle Ding Ding directly said, "You have been a policeman. They will not make things difficult for you." Uncle Ding Ding came prepared, and Mike's identity had been investigated. He promised that he would pull Tuku's ears to apologize to Mike, and Mike would get a reward of 5,000 yuan afterwards. After setting his own conditions, he asked Mike to be good. It seemed that things were going to get complicated, and Mike had to fight back accordingly. When he got home from get off work, he saw that Uncle Ding Ding's men had been waiting for a long time. It was obvious that they came to ask Mike for an answer. How could the tough Mike bow to others so easily? He would only compromise with his family. After the braided man left, Mike, who was good at investigation, began to arrange props. He took out some things such as the mats bought from the supermarket, and then naturally laid the mats at the door. As long as someone came, it would leave traces. As expected, when Mike came back at night, sure enough, there were footprints under the mat. He took out his pistol, then opened the door carefully and came in, but he didn't find any enemies. It seemed that they were hiding in the dark. Then, Mike turned on the TV, pretending that he had returned home, and waited at the door for an opportunity to counterattack. In a few moves, Mike subdued the two men and drove them away. Mike washed the blood off his hands, and at the same time showed the reaction of a normal person. His hands moved uncontrollably. This was a deterrent from the Salamanca family, and it also hinted that Mike would be in greater trouble. Sure enough, a few days later, when Mike was playing with his granddaughter by the swimming pool, suddenly, Mike spotted two unfriendly bald men standing on a distant rooftop. They were Tuku's cousins, the twin hitmen. They made a gun gesture towards Mike and his granddaughter. Mike gritted his teeth in anger, realizing they had threatened his family so quickly. It seemed there was no way to avoid this. Mike could only confront them head-on. He went to Uncle Nacho's base, an ice cream shop, where Nacho pretended not to know Mike and proceeded to search him. After checking for listening devices, Nacho reported that the other side was armed. Since they were on their own turf, Uncle Nacho said there was no need to confiscate his gun, and there were also the twin hitmen and the guy with the braids who Mike had previously dealt with. Uncle Ding Ding ordered Mike to go to the district attorney tomorrow to change his confession. However, Mike offered a condition of $50,000. Uncle Ding Ding said that he would not pay a penny. If he did not obey, he would let the twin killers visit his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. But Mike was not scared by his words, because he knew that Uncle Ding Ding's purpose was to clean up the butcher's ass. If he did not help, he would definitely not achieve his goal. So Mike was ready to fight hard. If he did not pay, they would die together. The barefoot are not afraid of the shoes. Mike is not only good at fighting, and the psychological tactics were quite effective. In the end, Uncle Nacho had to compromise with Mike. That night, Nacho sent someone to deliver money to Mike, intending to warn him to keep their secret. Mike pretended not to understand what Nacho's guy was saying and returned the previous $25,000. The guy was confused about why Mike was doing this, and Mike explained that since he couldn't help Nacho solve the problem, he should return the money in full. This was Mike's principle of handling things. It is precisely because of this principle that Mike has become the most stable character in the play. On the other hand, Jimmy, who felt guilty, came up with a bad idea for Xiaojin. He suggested that Xiaojin sue the HHM law firm to protect his rights. Obviously, Xiaojin would not do this. Even if he won, no law firm would be willing to hire him in the future. Hearing this, Jimmy had to say that he wanted to quit DM law firm. He thought this was the result Chuck wanted to see. Only in this way would Xiaojin not continue to be punished. However, Jimmy's point of view was speechless by Xiaojin. In order to get out of the cornfield, Xiaojin decided to make amends. He used all his connections to find clients, but he didn't find a single client after making all the calls. Although he was a little disappointed, he was not discouraged. He continued to make calls one after another in the garage, in the toilet, and in the conference room. In the end, he didn't even know how many calls he had made. However, when a person works to the extreme, God will favor him. In the end, Xiaojin finally got the big case of Mesa Verde Bank through a friend named Paige. In order to welcome this big client, Howard personally took charge and received him with Xiaojin. The chat was very pleasant, but what Xiaojin never expected was that after sending the client away, Howard would not let him follow up on the case. This incident also made Xiaojin begin to doubt his future in this law firm, and laid the groundwork for him to leave HHM law firm later. At night, Howard brought the Mesa Verde Bank case to Chuck. This was the fat meat in the workplace, and it should be left to the family first. Chuck lived up to his trust. Because of physical reasons, it was inconvenient for him to go to the law firm to handle the case during the day, so he came to the law firm to work overtime at night, and worked until dawn. Chuck, who can't stand the light, suddenly gets blinded by a flash. Following the light, he finds it's Kim who turned on the lamp, and upon seeing Chuck, she quickly turns it off. Chuck thinks Kim has come in early for work, not realizing she's actually working late and hasn't rested yet. Chuck asks Kim to make 2 cups of coffee and chat for a bit. Naturally, the conversation turns to Jimmy, and Chuck talks about their father. Their father was a genuinely good man who ran a convenience store, and in his worldview, there was no evil. Jimmy grew up helping his father in the store, and although his father worked hard to keep the business running, it ultimately failed due to mismanagement. Chuck, who had completed his studies, came back to help his father with the accounts and found that more than 10,000 yuan was missing. It was probably because Jimmy took the money from the account and was caught by Chuck. Chuck concluded that all the money was stolen by Jimmy, but his father did not believe it. Half a year later, his father passed away, and Jimmy cried heartbreakingly. Chuck believed that Jimmy was mainly responsible for this, but what he did not know was that a lot of the money was given away by his father, and the people he helped were actually taking advantage of his sympathy. All of this was seen by Jimmy, and it also had a huge impact on little Jimmy's worldview. He didn't want to be a sheep like his father, who could be easily taken advantage of. Chuck admitted that his brother was inherently good, but his biggest flaw was that he couldn't control himself, causing trouble and then relying on others to clean up his mess. Chuck's actions were truly infuriating. He even spoke ill of his brother in front of his girlfriend, and then offered to help Kim plead with Howard. If you were Kim, what would you want to say to Chuck?